Hey guys, today we're going to look at a very brief video. We're going to look at high versus low pressure. And we talked about pressure. Air pressure means that the air has weight, and sometimes when it weighs more, it'll push down on us here on the surface of the earth. We call that high pressure, and you could kind of see it on this video. On this presentation, you see the H. That is a high pressure system. And when we say a high pressure system, that means it's covering a very large area of land. This could be states here in the US. This could be the whole, half of the country. And then we have another type of pressure which has an L in the center. That is low pressure. And the way we're able to tell just by looking at a weather map, whether we're looking at high pressure or low pressure, we see those isobars, the lines of equal pressure that we talked about, and they go up or down by 4 millibars. So take a look at this set of isobars here on the left that I'm pointing to. This is high pressure. How do I know that? The outer isobar is 1,000 millibars. This is 1,004 millibars, and as I'm getting to the center, this would be 1,008 millibars. So if I keep going to the center, the pressure is going up. The highest air pressure would be in the center. We show that with an H. On the other side, 1,008 is the outer isobar. The next isobar goes down by 4 millibars. We could then figure this isobar here is 1,000 millibars. And if we went in the center, it would be either 997, 998, or 999 millibars. Therefore, this would be the lowest air pressure, and we show that with an L. So once you're able to identify what type of pressure you're looking at, you're going to be able to tell me a lot of stuff about what's going on with the weather in these areas, and also the wind. Wind is caused by differences in air pressure. So first thing is this: high and low pressure systems are due to the unequal heating of air masses. What does that mean? That means if a certain area is getting heated up more, that it's warmer, warm air rises. And if you're standing at the ground, let's say the bottom of this L is the ground, the air, if it's warm, would be rising, putting less pressure on you, low pressure. If an area is not getting heated as much, it's cold air. Cold air is more dense. So again, if you're down at the bottom here and you have cold air, more dense air would be pushing down on you. That is high pressure. So how are we going to be able to tell what happens with wind between a high pressure and a low pressure? I want you to do the following when you're asked about what's happening with wind in a high pressure and a low pressure area. And here's how you're going to do it. I'll just use arrows here. Hopefully this works. I've never tried the arrow function on this, but winds will blow from high to low air pressure. So the first thing you should do, if I were you, when you know you're getting questions, and you will get this question on your next test and on your next worksheet, next two worksheets, the first thing I would do on my piece of paper is draw the H and draw the L, leave a little space in between them, and then draw an arrow to show, whoops, that didn't work. Okay, so draw an arrow to show how the wind will blow. In this case, high to low pressure. Okay, that's first off. Then I want you to turn your paper these sideways. I can't really do that in this. Let me see if I can actually. I'll just escape out of that. Okay, I think I could do it this way though. All right, so the next thing I would want you to do is, I believe there is a function here to turn this around, right? Rotate left. Okay, you're going to turn your blank piece of paper so it will look like this. You'll have the H, the L, and you should have put in an arrow. I'm going to add an arrow in to show that winds will blow from high to low air pressure. Okay, Then, once you do that, you'll turn your paper. Well, you're not going to turn your paper. You're going to draw more arrows. So how are you going to do this? What you would do next is think about the Coriolis effect that we talked about. The Coriolis effect means that the wind is blowing above the surface of the earth, and the earth is rotating underneath the wind. And in the northern hemisphere, everything gets pushed to the right. And I think I told you to remember, again, nothing against lefties, love lefties, but most people are righty here in the northern hemisphere, also in the southern hemisphere, but we're in the northern hemisphere. We're going to think of ourselves. So winds get pushed to the right here in the northern hemisphere. So you see, this is why I'm telling you to turn it, because you can see the arrow is pointing up like this. So once you draw the H, you draw the L, you have the arrow going from the H to the L. You can curve the wind to the right of the arrow around the high, and to the right, you're going to want the wind to go around the L. And then you're just going to complete your arrows, kind of like that. All right, like that, and like that. So that's the wind going around the high. And then the wind will go around the low like that. All right, and once we complete our set of arrows, we're then going to turn our page around so we could see it normal. This might be a little bit difficult for me, but let's see if I can do this. All right, so I'm going to turn this back around and get it to the view that you would see once you turn your paper back. So rotate left, got to go two more, one more. Okay, I got to turn this arrow around like, nope, that's not working. Okay, let me get rid of that arrow. I will go full screen again and just announce everything I'm doing. Okay, so just to review, you're drawing the first arrow like that, high to low. Like I said, you're turning your page around so the arrow's pointing up, and once you do that, the arrows will curve like this around the H as you continue your arrows, and it will end up looking like that around the high. And then when you did this, and then you turn your page back around, this is what it would look like around a low. And now you'd be able to tell me all about the wind flow around a high and a low. First thing you want to know is you're going to look at that first arrow you drew, and you're going to want to tell me whether the wind is blowing into the center of the high pressure or away from the center. Use the first arrow you drew, this arrow, and you could see that this arrow is going out from the center of a high. So I would say outward from the center. If they were asking, does it go into the center or out from the center for a high? It's out. Here's the other thing. A low pressure, you're going to look at that original arrow you drew, and it's blowing into the center, right? You see how it's going from the high, out from the high, into the low pressure. So this goes in to the center of this area of weather. Okay, so that's that. That's one factor to look at with winds. The other factor is, how are the winds blowing? Clockwise or counterclockwise around a high and a low? So if this was 12 noon up here, this is 6, that would be 9, 12, 3, 6. You could see if this was a clock, the arrows are going the way a clock does around a high. So we would say the winds go out from the center, looking at the original arrow, and then the other arrows we drew are going clockwise. So this would be clockwise. Okay, doing my best to, I'm getting a little bit better with these, with the drawing here, I guess. Clockwise. Okay, although this takes forever. Okay, clockwise around a high. I thought I was getting better. And then at the low, look how this is going. It's going against the clock. We call that counterclockwise. I'll just abbreviate that CC. So that's the first important thing to know when looking at high versus low pressure. You're looking at how the winds blow. Okay, then we're going to look at a couple of other factors. So when you get a Regents question, a multiple choice question, the arrows might look like this. But let's talk about everything about a high pressure. First off, we already said winds blow out from the center in a high, right, into the center in a low. And the way they show that, by the way, let me just add this also, clockwise around a high and counterclockwise around a low. And if you take a look, sometimes they'll draw the arrows like this. You see how these arrows are going clockwise, but away from the H? So this is clockwise and outward from the center. And in a low, counterclockwise. See how the arrows are going against the clock, but they are also pointing into the center. All right, the pressure at the center in a high, like we said, the numbers are going up. So you'll get the highest pressure in the center here and the lowest pressure in a low pressure toward the center. Makes sense? That's why we name it. Weather conditions. This is an important thing to know. Couple of rhymes. Well, one rhyme right here. High is dry. So if it's dry weather, high pressure, think of yourself on a natural high. Good weather. Think about this past weekend. Beautiful, beautiful weather. So high is dry. With a low pressure, the key thing to the way to remember about the weather conditions in a low pressure is the W in low tells you everything about low pressure. Think about it. If this is dry, low pressure, I want you to think, is wet weather. And notice, what does wet start with? Starts with a W. And that's why I was telling you, the W in low gives it away. All right, so wet weather, cloudy weather, precipitation. Bad weather makes you feel low. And lastly, the temperature conditions. High pressure, remember I told you, that means the air is sinking. That's cool air. Cooler air is more dense, it sinks. That's why we get that wind blowing from the high to the low, because high pressure is more dense, and if it's more dense, it's pushing it into a low pressure, which is less dense. The air is rising away from us because it's less dense. And the reason why low pressure, the W tells you everything about the weather, not only are the weather conditions wet, it is also warmer air. Okay, so again, the W's give away everything about high and low pressure. And lastly, AKA, also known as, the high pressure is called an anticyclone. A low pressure is called a cyclone. Not that you're going to really need to know that. And lastly, this is just, if you go to this page, it just kind of shows you how the weather moves. High pressure at the surface is cooler air. It's descending, applying pressure at the surface. That's why we say high pressure here. And then low pressure is less dense. It's warmer air. It rises. And you can see as air rises, it cools to the dew point. And that's how you get clouds. You can see thunder, lightning. Well, you can see the lightning. You can hear the thunder. And look at the wind flow. It is going counterclockwise around the low, clockwise around the high, and the wind will blow from high to low. Okay, so hopefully that helps everybody out.